Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BAInsights. And today I'm glad to be talking about the topic of how to become a business analyst. And I'm once again joined by some excellent guests to talk to us about that topic. But let's introduce them before we get into the topic itself. So let's start with Tosin to introduce himself.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, John, for the invite. And yeah, my name is Oluwatosin Oludayo. I currently work as one of the product business analysts within the Scottish government. Aside from that, I have an organization called BAInsights, where we literally support people who are trying to, branch into the field of business analysis. We provide them cases, share different links and resources with them that can help them, make that transition. And for those who are already like growing on within that space, we also like sort of like do some sort of like collaborations with them, just do different bit of things that can help them, to grow their competencies and get the confidence they need to be able to like, execute on their jobs. The
Excellent.
good side of that is I'm going to be starting a senior role like next month with another government organization. So that's based in England. So currently I'm in Scotland, but then I'll be moving to England in the next couple of weeks. So that's about myself.
Excellent, thank you. And Indy.
Uh, well, I started in Scotland. I was born there. It's very exciting to hear someone who lives there. I am situated in Toronto, Canada, and I have been working in the technology business analysis arena since the late 70s, early 80s. And right now, I am an independent contractor. I basically put myself out on the street to see if anybody will take me and use some of my skill sets. So that's what I've been doing for the past year. I've sort of took the year off and did a lot of education and spent some time understanding things like AI and how it impacts the business analyst and uh, that kind of thing. I am coming nearer to the end of my career, so I'm struggling a little bit with how to do that in a graceful way because I don't know many business analysts who have stopped being business analysts, except for people who have actually uh, moved into different roles and so on. So it's an interesting transition as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, Indy, and I think I'm sure the BA skills that you've built up over the years will be more than useful in whatever you do next. Anyway, so
Okay, thank you.
excellent. Well, thank you for your introductions. Clearly, you're both excellent people talking about the topic of business analysis and how you become a BA. So maybe let's start with that question first and to toss in. So how did you become a business analyst?
Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting question. So I moved to the UK in 2021. I came on a scholarship, a Mastercard Foundation scholarship. But
Ooh,
prior to that time, I was in Nigeria. I started in an oil and gas as a business development intern. So the bulk of what we did were around like bidding, procurement. We did some things around like, sourcing for items from the oil and gas industry. And after like 6 months of that internship, we became permanent staff. So I was given the title of a business analyst, but my job description still centered more around strategy, operations, sourcing, bidding, and some bit of finance. So when I moved to the UK in 2021, I spoke with someone that, hey, I was working as a business analyst in Nigeria, and they started asking me, what were you doing? So they were expecting me to say, oh, I know how to use SQL. I do some bit of like maybe querying of databases. They wanted to hear things around user stories, writing use cases. I'm like, I don't know what of those things are. All I know is I was doing strategy, I was doing business development. And then like, if you want to get a role here in the UK, you need to like become skilled within those areas. Just know some bit about analytics, but beyond that, know a lot of things about technology project implementation. So I asked them, how do I go about that? So there were some organizations here in the UK and some in Canada that like do those sort of like upskilling programs where they train you for like 6 weeks theoretically, teach you all aspect of business analysis from stakeholder management, requirement engineering, process modeling, and things like that. So even though I was called a business analyst in Nigeria, those were not things I had heard about. I didn't even know that clients are stakeholders in that sense. I just know them, they are my clients and to do business with them. So I had to like do that for like 6 weeks, learning the technical language of business analysis. Then after that 6 weeks, we then went to the practicum side of it, where we had to implement, I think it was an accounting management system or a property management system for a client. And then we're trying to put all of those things we've learned together in terms of like reward usage. It was really very difficult, but I could see some bit of things around what I had learned and what I had done before, even though I didn't know those any more technical names for them, and then practicalizing that. So after that 6 weeks of practicum, I was fortunate to get an internship somewhere in Nigeria where I literally joined them to like see, okay, now that I've done some bit of practicum, I've done some theoretical aspect of business analysis, how can I do this on my own? It was really very difficult because there was no business analyst within that context. It was a startup. So they had like a more proper tech team, the product manager, they had the development guys. They had never worked with a BA before. And I'd never worked with them too before. So it was really very difficult trying to see exactly what I would do. So I think the best of what I did was just around like mapping their processes and trying to see point of inefficiencies. And I was slightly distracted by that experience because I didn't know if I added value. But looking back, I think I did the best, in terms of my knowledge. And I have turned on that to get another role. I think the next role I got out of that was a role with the London Borough of London, and then learn some more things that were different from what I had done before. And then I had progression with that. I think just to summarize, I think in terms of like pathways, if I were to advise someone, it's either to look to the route of do a training with all these consultancy organizations where you learn theoretically what business analysis is about, at least to the very high level. Then work on some projects that can help you build some confidence. Then progress beyond that to probably looking for an internship if there's one around you, just to like deepen your confidence because you need confidence to be able to like do your work as a BA, and then take the risk after that to start applying for jobs. Of course, I know there are other pathways too, like maybe if you work in a company where they already have the business analysis division, you could shadow the BAs, say you want to know what they are doing, ask them questions, or you could apply for secondment or maybe temporary transfers where somebody is going on maternity leave and you're like, can I jump on this? Or even apprenticeship programs here in the UK where you could say, can I use this as a pathway to join some of these programs? I think those are like some of the different routes to venture into that space. But the one I did was training, internship, and then getting my first role after.
Excellent, thank you, Justin. And I'm sure will all be a slight variation on that, but it's definitely interesting to show that for some people, such as yourself, become business analysts, perhaps without necessarily knowing in the first instance, or their title is maybe something a little different, or they start, doing some aspects of the business analyst role, and only as they sort of grow and do more and more, that their role becomes formally recognised as BA.
Right.
Excellent stuff. Thank you. Indy, what will be your perspective?
So my immediate reaction is exactly the same. I fell into business analysis. I didn't know it had existed back in the early 80s. It was not even a concept. I mean, Gain and Sarson had produced their structured systems analysis text, and we were all killing ourselves to get into that course. But it was not something that was recognized as a specific role. And how I became a business analyst was to actually get hired as a business analyst by a brave woman who took me and said, you can be my business analyst. And I went, okay. So I didn't know at the time a lot about how the business works and how stakeholders work and what all the various areas and capabilities we could potentially look at as business analysts. But what I have done is I have realized that over the years, I have enough of a 50,000 foot level, or I guess a straightforward understanding of how it all kind of fits together. And, I'm curious and I ask questions and I spend time with people so that I understand what's going on. So every single business analysis experience I've been involved in has been slightly different. The one that I was hired for initially involved all the major banks in Canada, and this was in the early 80s. We were building the Canadian Payments Association, which is a kind of big thing, and we were creating a money market system, and it involved all the brokers. So at the time, our industry was very segmented, and it has now since consolidated. A lot of the brokers and so on are actually part of the banks and so on. So here's Indy with this little girl she wasn't a little girl, this woman who is also a business analyst, but like me, has come from operations or come from a different area of technology. And we are asked to run a JAD session. And we're going, oh, great, yeah, let's run a JAD session. So I'm sitting there, and we had 50 people in the room, including the Bank of Canada, who all disagreed with one another and all sniped, and it was really terrible. And so we spent a lot of time in that first year understanding who the stakeholders were, not only who the decision makers were, but also who the key stakeholders were in terms of being able to implement the system once we'd implemented it. And that was kind of fun. So back then we didn't have Visio, we didn't have PowerPoint. We had, I don't even know what software we used, probably Word. And we printed page screens, user interface screens onto photostats, which is like this vinyl paper, and it gets projected up on the wall. And we had like 1 million of page one, and we filled them all out as if we were the users using that software. It was really quite painful, and things like Visio and these newer techniques that are out there are a godsend. They didn't exist back then. So I became a business analyst because kicking and screaming, I guess, is the best way to put it. But I discovered that as I went through the process of learning, like Tosi, I also went to, I worked for a consulting company which prided itself on a procedure called Productivity Plus, which was all about process modeling and data modeling and so on and so forth. So I got training through there. Then as time went by, the training changed, the training morphed, but at the end of the day, it's the same. It's the same thing. We're all doing the same thing. It's just that the context is different, the scope is different, the people are different, the business is different, just everything is slightly skewed, but it's the same process. So I always laugh when people say to me, well, you should know what to do. And I'm like, well, I don't really. And then I go, no, I can walk in and I can start asking questions. I can start reading policy. I can start reading user documentation. I can talk to people and find out what's going on, which is what a business analyst really is to take all of that information and synthesize it. So that's how I became a business analyst. I've had many different business analysis positions. I've hired business analysts. I've worked as a business analyst. I helped at a big bank that I worked at for a long time, helped them to establish a business analysis methodology within their organization. And as part of that, that's how I got involved with IIBA and all of that, because we created IIBA as a result of the work that we were doing at the Bank of Montreal. So it's just been, it just grows and grows and grows, and it's the same activity. So even though I fell into it, I wouldn't recommend, and I've always feel this, but I don't say it out loud very much. I don't recommend that you just wake up one day and say, I want to be a business analyst. You are a business analyst. Everybody is a business analyst. It's just the level of information and level of interest that you have in a topic that makes you a business analyst within the context of whatever that project happens to be. So everybody's a business analyst. A CEO is a business analyst. A secretary is a business analyst. An admin assistant is a business analyst. We just have specific techniques that we use within the realms that we work in. So
yeah. And it seems like somewhat of a trodden path, Indy, I think, where people, I don't know whether I want to use fall into the BA role, but they don't necessarily start off like maybe as a kid, like some people might want to be a fireman when they're older or whatever.
Football developer.
No one wants to be a a BA necessarily, or the
No, I just wanted working computers. I didn't care what it was. And I was doing COBOL programming. So
that's it. And I mean, it's fairly similar for me. I didn't want to necessarily be a developer, but I was I wasn't necessarily. I think it's more similar to what Tosin was saying, really. So I was working in a particular team for a Swiss bank, and my natural inclination was to try and improve my own process, make it a bit more efficient. You know, try and not waste my time and try and automate some things that I was doing. So that led to me getting an opportunity to formally be working change and to do some business analysis. But I will say it probably took about 3 months after that to know that it was actually called business analysis. You know, so very similar to what you described. You know, meeting the vast number of stakeholders, hearing bits about requirements and process and
right.
systems. And then at a certain point, someone said, "That's business analysis you're doing. That's your formal title now." And I was like, "Okay, I feel like I could. This feels like it's a decent start. Feels interesting."
And that's one of the reasons why IIBA was created, was we felt the industry, the profession wasn't receiving the recognition and understanding that it needed. The business analysis title didn't exist. And everybody had these skills. They could do process models, up the yin yang, understand data, do process improvements. But there was nothing out there in the industry that supported what we did. There were pockets of it around the world, but nothing centralized. And that's one of the reasons why IIBA was created in the first place, was to try to bring that forward and make it a more of a profession. And they've, of course, gone leaps and bounds past what we originally imagined, but that's why. So
I mean, I can certainly relate to like being on the other side of things from an IBA perspective. And I think when at that time I mentioned, it wasn't long after my first 3 months that I thought, is what else is there to this role? And organisations like the IIBA and BCS, the British Computer Society, they
yeah,
they were sort of the two places I went to basically and started finding out information, hoovering up views as to what BA was and what books to read. Actually, that was probably a really useful first step.
there's
And
only one book to read.
there was at the time, actually, there was, in fact, yeah, well, I don't know if there was only one, but there was only one that got come past my nose, which was Debbie Paul's "What is Business Analysis."
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
there's a few more to choose from now, which I'm glad to say. And I mean, also, I mean, the work that the IBA and BCS and others have done, and the community, I think BA community has done a great job to make more people aware that this is a career, it's a profession that you can get into, and give some people some understanding of what they're doing or what they could be doing.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a challenge that we now need to spread more awareness to maybe some of the organisations to show them the value of the BA role, but that's probably one for another day. Much bigger
Another
topic.
day, yeah.
Yes. But
There's so much knowledge that has been um, gathered and stored, and so different organizations have different reasons for existing. Some are partners of IIBA, so they train people, they get people ready for certification. Then there's IIBA itself, which worries about all sorts of things like networking chapters and so on and so forth. But getting everybody onto the same page, in my view, is not that difficult because we are all of the same mindset. The difference is that different people have different levels of implementation of business analysis capabilities. So I was in a conference the other day, and a woman said that she was in, I think, Netherlands, and they had no. It was in that lone business analyst session that you did. The woman that
okay,
talked
yeah.
about having no support at all because that country just doesn't recognize the role. So how do we leverage the knowledge and the conversations and the issues that are coming out of these types of sessions so that we can then further address what the business analyst actually needs?
I think it's an interesting one, you know. The last time I was in Portugal, I went to see some of my friends, and I think I also branched out Spain. And they work as testers, some of them work as software developers. And I
Yeah,
asked,
yeah.
have you worked with a BA before? They said no. Like in all of their career, some of them are like 5 years into the profession as a tester, and they haven't worked as a BA before. And at some point, I was beginning to like ask, like, why? And I think one of the things that maybe I came to realize, you know, when I joined the Scottish government, There's a thing we call like the double diamond, where literally you could see how your role as a BA, for example, is intersecting with what another person in the organization is doing. For example, you could see like maybe a product owner or a product manager, maybe main options paper, where ideally it should be something, maybe in some context done by the BA. You could see like a service designer, maybe creating a blueprint, where in the sense of it, it looks like you mapping a journey, and where it should be something done by maybe like a business analyst. I think that the more this knowledge are like spreading, the more organizations are beginning to understand that, okay, I think these, all of these things that we are throwing under like a PO, these that we are throwing under a service designer, I think we could put all of this together and really make it be to like be responsible for them. And the more these conversations are going on, the better people understand that, okay, I think these are like many things we are throwing at different people. I think a particular person should be responsible for, and they will ensure better tracking, better documentation, and better management of all of these various conversations going. But definitely the conversations going on has been shaping a lot of things. And I'm sure that in the next couple of years too, the advancements of these conversations we also like lead more strategic outputs for all different stakeholders within that space.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, as you're both sort of talking about, I guess, education to some degree, be interesting to take your perspective on, was there any prior education that you've done or education since becoming a BA that has helped your BA role? And perhaps we'll start with you, Indy.
You want to start with me?
Please.
The education that I had, the only formal business analysis education I've had is through companies I work for. So the consulting company I worked for initially with Productivity Plus. And at Bank of Montreal, because we were building out methodology and how we were going to do that, we were writing training, we were participating in training and that sort of thing. So the only formal education I have is in computer science. And so I know how to code and I know how it all kind of hangs together. And I'm very interested in that part of thing, but I'm not a technology business analyst. So people don't understand that distinction sometimes. And I think we need to do more to help people understand what the distinctions are. And just having spent the last year talking to headhunters and job people looking for BAs to work on a project, the number of generic descriptions that I see are just unbelievable. And I'm like, oh, you want me to be a tester and I happen to know SQL as well and all those sorts of things. And I'm like, it's become so generalized that it's lost its ability to really glom onto where we can add value. So things like AI and using AI as a tool to improve the work that we do as business analysts is a way of us giving value to our business partners, but it isn't necessarily it's something that defines us as business analysts. Things like Agile, using Agile, BA in Agile or BA in Waterfall. The role the BA plays at the end of the day is understand everything, document everything, trace everything, and make sure that it gets delivered the way that the business wants it. And that's it. And so my education, as I said, is a degree in computer science, which I got from University of Waterloo a long time ago. And formally, I was going to mention I am also certified in risk and systems information control, which is a designation produced by the ISACA, which is an organization that does risk management and so on and so forth, which is also helpful because it has a focus on control and process and what kinds of things you need to put into place to manage risks associated with putting those into place. So that's the limit of my education. I don't, other than, being sent on courses by my companies, I haven't specifically taken a course. I mean, I go onto LinkedIn and try some of Angela's courses or Vince's courses. I have talked a lot to people like Laura Brandenburg and the gentleman from US Adaptive, Ellen Mishra, I think is the name, and various other education providers. And I have no desire to kind of take their course. So, because I feel like I know the course. So it's kind of dumb because, you think you get older, you're going to forget this stuff. But so far I haven't.
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
I'm sure you don't. That's it. After it becomes ingrained in your approach, I think.
it's in my DNA. It's just there.
I think so. Yeah, and I mean, on the point of education, I mean, what your answer shows as well is that that for some people maybe are qualifications that they can take that will help them get into a BA role, but for many of us, we've got into a BA role, and we've obviously already discussed that. But sometimes our education we get is something we use supplementary and since then to add to the skills, and like your technology qualification as well is something that will give you a perspective that will be useful when you're doing your analysis work.
It helps with speaking to developers and technology architects and service delivery people. It really helps to
And,
understand how that all works.
and Tosin, I know you mentioned a while ago that with your first organisation, you moved to. They gave you 6 weeks training, but I wondered, do you have any prior educational training before that you think has helped you become a BA or since?
Yes, I mean, I would think so. If you look at T-shaped competence within the business analysis framework, where they talk about the breadth of skills and then the depth of like the more technical skills. If I look at the breadth side of it, where you talk about things like your professional skills and maybe personal qualities like listening, speaking, I would say that some of my previous education, whether in engineering or my master's in innovation, there are some bit of skills here and there that I can pick that I think within that breadth side of that T-shape, they are filling into it. For example, when we are looking at business cases, whether we are trying to like argue with ourselves or we're trying to look at how to answer some questions or trying to find trends within some data set we are looking at, even though directly we are not doing business analysis within like the classroom, but the way we are interacting with those cases, making arguments, presenting our points, trying to like put together a PowerPoint to present our findings, the research we do alongside all of those things. I think somehow they are more translated into what I do to on a day-to-day basis in my work. For example, if you listen to like different stakeholders explaining something to you, that's like you dealing with large volume information. If you crystallize that, that's like you trying to like create a business, like maybe like a case out of that, and then trying to make sense of it to like generate like a solution on how to do it or a recommendation in that sense. So like the business. Again, to, for example, when stakeholders say something, there are times to challenge them. There are times when certain business rules within the company are outdated and they are affecting a process or affecting like maybe like the bottom line that you look at it and you want to challenge that. In the sense, when I was learning those things, I wasn't doing business analysis in the more formal sense. But like, Indy said, all of us are BAs, and it's because those
Yeah.
your skills we've acquired are like playing, impacting how we deliver on those roles. But in terms of the depth side of it, I did some trainings with BCS. I did about 4 courses already, and I'm working towards my diploma, which I'm hoping to write either this month or next month. So I've done requirement engineering. I've done modeling business processes, and I think some other ones. But I had already learned some of these things like in the field before coming to like learn it from BCS. Which sometimes when we're learning some of those things, I was thinking, if I don't know how to model a process, I'm not sure I will have learned how to do it with this course I've taken. Not to say the courses are not superb, they are excellent. There are
Yeah.
many things you didn't know that this is like the more technical or this is the proper way to do them. But through taking those courses, I could see, oh, this is what they call this particular thing or this particular symbol I'm using here. This is the rationale behind it. I learned all of those things, but I'd learned how to model those processes myself before joining those courses. I'm also, I think I have also had a number of knowledge sharing sessions with some of my senior colleagues at work, people who knew certain technical part of like, the business. For example, there was a time we were doing some works around notifications. There were people who had been in the company much longer. They knew about our legacy system, the various triggers that could make those notifications to work. it was like a whole body of knowledge on its own that they ran us through it like a couple of times. I think I'm still struggling to even understand what that is really is, but that exposure is really very helpful. And I would say that in a sense, that is also the part of education I have been privileged to have from my current employer. But aside from that, I haven't done anything else. So yes, my formal education in my engineering and innovation, on the other to the breadth side of that T-shaped competence, but the BCS stuff, but the more knowledge sharing sessions I've had with my senior colleague, they have added to like the depth part of that T-shape.
Mhm.
I mean, what your answer showed there as well is that there'll be people that have prior education, prior skills, be it around challenging stakeholders as an example that you brought up, or just general communication, or the way that they interact or consider, loads of different skills, and that they can be built up throughout their prior education, their prior life, their prior roles, and they can bring them into the BA role, and they're very useful. And then there's also though more technical, I don't want to call them technical, but it will be a technique specific education that we get that may happen prior, during, or at some stage in your BA life cycle. And for some people, perhaps, it's probably better. Maybe for them, it's better to actually learn a little bit about the BA role, to do it first, to understand why they might need the technique, and then go and explore what techniques are available. Whereas they could spend a lot of time learning the techniques before even becoming a BA, potentially not actually becoming a BA, so never using the techniques potentially.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
double-edged sword.
I mean, the communication point you both mentioned. I mean, that for me is sort of something that's definitely resonate. I mean, I think you sort of touched them as well. That sort of like building up domain knowledge and the expertise in your area, and these are all things that you individuals can build up and utilize as part of becoming a BA. You've got knowledge of your organisation, you've got knowledge of your business, you've been a practitioner in that business. Then who better to have a perspective, not necessarily the only perspective, but a perspective.
Mhm. Yeah.
And of course, there'll be people looking at this and watching this as well who would have taken a slightly different path, and maybe their education would be directly relating to BA qualifications and diplomas that exist in universities and colleges around the world.
Yeah. Do they exist in those places? Because they didn't when I was there.
Yeah, that's is doing these conversations, having these conversations, and being involved in conferences has sort of really opened my eyes a bit, Indy, because I think I'm like you. When I started, there wasn't qualifications, there wasn't a natural path for people to go university and then into business
Yeah.
analysis.
Yeah.
But it's surprising how many people have sort of taken a related degree that has either it's about not business analysis or typically has a module or two related to BA
Yeah. Yeah.
that they use. And so therefore, when they come into their first role from university, it's a topic they're familiar with, and I get the benefit of being able to train people at Capco as they join, some of our associate joiners, and more and more of them are aware of BA. When I asked the opening question during the training, has anyone ever heard of it? Whereas maybe 10 years ago, the answer would have been a little different, and people would have said,
Mhm.
no, I've never heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, but I'm a boomer, I'm old, I've been around for a long time. It's very frightening to me to have a young person come out of university or out of college and say, okay, now you're a business analyst, as on the basis of these types of courses. I didn't become a business analyst until 12 years out of my university degree. So I had to go through being a developer, working with uh, project teams and the technical people and all of that kind of stuff in order to be able to understand the specifics of what a business analyst actually does. And I think people that are saying things like the things you need to avoid when you become a business analyst are, but you need to concentrate on these things, communication, soft skills, all those sorts of things. Um, it makes life onerous for those people. And some people, kind of skate away from that, and then they end up um, not using the skills.
Yeah, yeah.
Sad.
That's
Yeah.
that's it. That's why perhaps it's better to be doing the role, and then understand what skills that you think are beneficial for that particular role and start developing.
And not all business analysts are the same. They all use different ways of doing things. And the big thing is when you get into an organization that's big enough, you find out what their methodology is first and foremost, as opposed to what the guy next to you is telling you should be doing. So
certainly help.
Even off the back of that, you had mentioned something earlier, Indy, about the various business analyst roles you've worked, how they are slightly different from one another. I think experience, you have worked in a couple of places, and what you will see is that what you do in company A might be somehow different from what you do as a business analyst in company B, and it might be slightly different from what you do in company C. Why something be like basic, maybe common, like maybe there might be common denominator to all of them, maybe like, but at the general sense, they are mostly very different. So saying that I studied business analysis, that's a diploma in school, and thinking that I have gotten all I need might be in itself slightly self-deceptive and might not truly represent what's happening in the market. And I think one of the things I have heard, I've seen a couple of times, even here in the UK, yes, it's good to study business analytics, for example, in school, but you realize that maybe what you studied and what's going on in the market might be somehow different. And you need to start picking up your own learnings from the scratch again. So I think, being qualified is good, or being flexible and adaptable to continuously like looking for learning opportunities, speaking with people that are in the field, knowing what to do is ultimately like more important, within that space of that career.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, you mentioned some skills there, and I think we'll come on to that question actually shortly, because I think, I had intended before this session to start to ask you a specific question around, best way for someone without direct experience to break into business analysis. But I feel like we sort of talked about that up till this point, really, haven't we? In terms of, that there's the opportunity for someone to take a role, and then as they become aware of BA, to transition into it, to utilize their domain skills, all the things we've spoken about. There are now pathways from university into, programs similar to perhaps what Associate Motor taken to learn a bit about BA first. There's consultancies, there's various other opportunities, I think, for people who want to get involved in business analysis, as well as, just recognizing the skills that they do have, and recognizing that, because the BA role is so broad that they don't necessarily have to have every single skill set before they can start. Actually having a few of them, probably the best place to start.
One of the things that intrigues me, and I'd like to get your opinion, is breaking into business analysis is one thing. Learning the techniques and understanding how they fit together, the tools and techniques and so on. I recall a time when business analysts would be almost like order takers for our, we'd be, taking requirements, writing them down, giving them to the developers and so on and so forth. But we also, what am I trying to say? We're also trying to get, no, this is something to do with soft skills. I've forgotten what I was going to say, John. Sorry.
Is it about sort of like the skill set to actually elicit some of the requirements rather than just it was be that note taker, to explore what people need.
Exactly.
Need it.
Yeah, you need to do more than that. But then there's the order taker, and then there's the recipe follower. What I call the recipe follower, someone who always says, what is the methodology? How should I do it? Well, how do I fill in this box here in this form so that the business requirements are documented in a way that the company requires? And there's always a tendency, even with the BAC, the BA BAC, to open it up and go, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And business analysts can become very inured to other things outside, and they worry about the process and how do I get to where I need to get to. And I think the successful business analysts are the ones who are able to take a step past that. And it's not something that you just, some people have the ability and they ask lots of questions and they take the time to do that. But there are others who have to learn how to do that. And it's not easy. But the order taker piece and the recipe followers, I wonder, how do you help the newer people that want to become business analysts to understand that it is not a job that is taking orders or following a recipe, but is in fact a role where you are asking questions, getting information about what is going on, trying to pull it all together from your perspective, but also from the stakeholders' perspective and so on. I'm just
Yeah.
curious about what you guys think about that.
I mean, from my perspective, I think it's really important to give a new BA the support so that they can ask the questions that they need to ask to understand the context and understand the situation and understand what the stakeholders need, but also to be there by their side to say, is that enough? Are you taking that at face value? What's the root causes? Why do they need it? And to just give them some of those, on the spot guidance to say, yeah, you've asked some questions there, but that's, you've initially asked questions that help you as an individual get some understanding, which probably most people would ask. But what are the next level of questions you could ask as a BA to really start to understand some valuable information from it? And that's not one interaction. I think that's a continual journey to give them the support so that in any situation they can go to people more senior, more experienced, or even just people with a different perspective and share what they've done, get them involved, and then seek their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really very awesome, John. I think off the back of my mind, I was just thinking, when you allow people to shadow you too, sometimes especially the new BAs, and then maybe after you'll give them opportunity to ask questions like, why do you think I was doing this? It also helps them to reflect about things and be able to crystallize those learnings. Sometimes when they do things too, sometimes I think it's also good to give people opportunity to make mistakes, and then
Yeah.
on that they also like learn, ask them questions, like self-reflecting with them. They were able to like bring out some things out of that. I remember a time when I started my first BA role here in the UK. I was working with a very brilliant senior business analyst. So we had like a business case. Like there's already a template where we fill some things out. And so when we meet a business area, we want to like understand what they're trying to do. I noticed that they don't follow the templates like step by step. So now we need to understand the aim of these conversations. What is the needs? What are the perspective? What is the cost? What is the process? No, they don't follow. They have general conversation. And I try to see why the senior PA is doing it that way. And after the call, asking questions. So why are you not following this in a really good way? So at first he would say he's been doing this for almost 10 years. But looking back, he will be like, I think I know what is like the good question to ask. What is more important from the business point of view? Because when you write that document, you don't just keep it. What happens next is it goes to management. Management only look at a portion of that document. They don't read the 15 pages. So he knows what the management is more interested in. And that's what he's more keen about understanding from the point of view. I remember I was really very keen about process maps too. So when we map this process, where does it go? What does it end up with? I was really keen about what is the, I know this is an output in that sense or an artifact, but what is the use of it, right? And when I started understanding this is the end point of this person, this is why it is being created, or we want to use it to create operational guidance to be able to guide our front staff who will be dealing with like client for stand to know how to do it. Those things like made it better for me that when I'm dealing with business to understand maybe a process, I know exactly what to look out for. Because ultimately, this is where the value sits. Why I know everything is valuable, but in terms of like if I look at it like Pareto, this is the 20% that is as weighty as the other 80% in this document. And I'm trying to channel my attention. So I think shadowing, allowing people to make mistakes, reflecting with them, I think helps like the newbies to better understand things much better.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, you touch on one of the points you touched on there, I think earlier, Tosin, about that curiosity, I think something we need to do as experienced BAs is trying to encourage that curiosity amongst those that are new to BA, so that they're asking all the questions that they should be asking and that occur to them, and to feel comfortable that no question is a stupid question. If they don't know the answer, they should feel comfortable asking, what does that mean? Why should I do that? who is this person? What do I do next, etc. We need to create that environment for them to ask those sort of questions. And I'm pretty sure from my experience that if we do that, then some of the questions we'll actually learn from them as well.
Yeah.
Because you know,
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident I don't ask all the right questions all at the right times. Anyway, I'd like to, but I don't.
I always
Yeah.
used to tell business analysts that if you have a question in your head and someone has raised a point and everybody's done what they have to do for the meeting, and you still have a question, you have every right to ask that question. Because you need to understand the answer to that question. Now, if it's a political kind of question, that's a different thing. But it's the kind of thing where you might need to call up, a person and say, can you walk me through this so I can understand why this is the way it is? And how can that be improved, or can it not be improved? And this is the way it's going to be. So it's those kinds of things. And it's to be not afraid to keep asking the questions. And people talk about ask questions. Don't avoid not asking questions, not asking the right questions, all of those sorts of things. The bottom line is as a business analyst, you are the subject matter expert, if you like, of the project, the scope, and all of those things, as I was saying earlier. And you need to understand how it all hangs together and be able to explain it to people, whether it's a CEO or just an operator on the floor. So we spend a lot of time coaching new business analysts around this concept of, if you have a question, ask it.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
hold back. Yeah.
What you said is really very profound. I remember what one of my principal business analysts told me, because by default, I'm always very quiet when I get to a new environment. I'm trying to understand everything. So I just keep quiet in calls, off my video, off my mic. And he told me, Tosin, you cannot be the quiet business analyst. You need to ask questions, stupid questions. There are no, you would think sometimes you have a question in your mind, you think I can find this on our Confluence page, or I'll just ask ChatGPT or but somebody else is bold enough to ask, and that leads to very interesting conversations within the call. And I'm like, why do I self-condemn myself? Why do I keep quiet? And I just learned that you just need to speak, ask questions. Sometimes those conversations, like what they engender, what they bring out of them, is even much more nourishing than.
That's always a, I mean, it's really, really valid point for new BAs. I think sometimes they can probably sit as we've all done, sit in the room and think, I've got a question in exactly the same way you outlined. Should I ask that question? Maybe I'm the only one that doesn't understand? And you ask the question, and then you realize that actually you're not the only one that didn't understand. You're just the only one that was bold enough to say, I don't understand. And because you need to, you should rightly ask the question. So I think anyone who has a little bit of discomfort asking that question should feel a little bit relieved to know that as soon as they ask it, there's going to be others in the room who will thank them, because actually they may be a little bit too shy to ask the question themselves, or maybe they should know the answer and they don't. You know. And I mean, what you've outlined there between is you've touched on a couple of sort of skills really that the BAs really could, or new BAs could develop. I think Indy, you touched on like political awareness. I think within the organisation, you definitely both talked about communication. I think that asking questions and that being inquisitive and curious are definitely skills that you mentioned. I think Tosin, you touched on process expertise as well. But I wondered, are there any other skills that you might recommend a new BA to also develop to get into the role? And Tosin, I'll put that question to you first.
I think it's an interesting one. Me, if we keep mentioning skills, we'll mention quite a lot. But in terms of like knowledge areas, I think that's something I've been more interested in more recently. For example, there was a time I was asked to do a piece of work around data management. I'd never done that before. I never knew BAs could be responsible for things around data strategy or some things around governance. So I think it was really a nice piece of work hearing about metadata for the first time. And I had to like start digging into it. So I am picking up the brain of one of my friends who work in that space to like build a curriculum for me while I pay him, and then he teaches me that. But more recently, I've seen that some BAs are more involved in testing. We hear them talk about preparing like test cases, test scripts. In my role, our work stops at writing the ACs, and then the testers pick it up. When they are done, we review the test evidences. But when I speak to BAs in much smaller organizations, they are more involved in testing, like different sort of like testing. So that's something I'm also like trying to like go into and learn more. Change management is also like a knowledge area. I've heard a lot of BAs always talk about like they are involved in doing things around change requests and all. So because I work in a large organizations, there are specific individuals responsible for those things.
Yeah.
I'm trying to venture into smaller organizations. Those are knowledge areas I would need to like know about. So I'm making effort to learn about testing, data management. I'm trying to learn about change management. I don't do data analysis, but I heard some BAs like they work a lot with databases. So those are also like areas I'm trying to learn, but I'm trying to keep my head not too much under those, so that I don't get too overwhelmed. But just little by little, I'm just trying to have awareness of them. And if any piece of work comes around that, I know where to go to talk. Like now, I think I got my
And that answer,
Yeah.
I mean, as well, it just shows that, that really valuable skill set, things to learn for new BAs is actually doesn't have to be just focused on what the conventional BA activities, but actually having the awareness of the arena that you're operating in, some of the key roles, some of the other things that happen as part of change management is really going to set you off on the right foot to be able to be successful rather than have a very narrow view of your role.
Right. And you need to be willing to do the research and take the time to understand it. And sometimes you have limited time to do that. You get hired for a contract and they say, we want you to implement this particular regulation in this particular organization. You're like, well, what's the regulation? And so you spend your whole time Googling stuff and that kind of thing. Things have changed so much over the years. And things like AI are going to be excellent tools. And so the youngsters that are coming up who are familiar with this stuff have a huge advantage over many of us. However, it is definitely something that people need to be able to do is know how to go get the answers to the questions that you're supposed to know about. Like they'll say to you, do you have knowledge of the whatever domain? And you're like, never heard of it. But, you spend a lot of time understanding all of that. And you have to be able to gather, synthesize, understand, and then be able to apply what you've learned to the particular situation. And it's not something that you would formally go get trained for. It's just a research focus. It's being nimble. It's being right on in terms of being able to. Gosh, I'm old. Is being able to understand things quickly and without a lot of additional support. AI is going to be really a big tool there. And it's definitely something like I have years of experience and but if I was me 30 years ago being asked to do what I was doing, would I have done it the same way if I had all the tools available to me? No. I would have spent a lot more time understanding how the financial industry works, who the various people are, and why they need to have this real-time clearing system for money market securities. At the time, I didn't have that luxury. I had the material that the project gave me and whatever someone else told me about it. So it's definitely an area where you have to be able to research and understand and quickly synthesize and figure out what is most important for this particular situation that you're in.
Yeah, I would agree. And that research and that investigation, you say, I mean, it definitely can be aided by AI, whether you're new to BA or been a BA for a while. There's obviously the convenience that brings in terms of not having to try and always find the expert to ask them the question or to find the right publication to read to understand what you should be able to understand. Of course, what we do need to make sure though is that when we do rely on AI, that we do enough follow up to make sure we're not just taking the first answer. But
Yeah.
I agree with you, Indy. I think it's such a valuable resource to do that that we have as part of our research.
Being able to discern the hallucinations from the reality is also really important. And I spend a lot of time arguing with AIs, and I'm like, why am I arguing with you? You're a computer. But it's really trying to understand where the truth really lies and that kind of thing. So
that's right, and reusing that sort of challenging mindset that one of you called up earlier on. So it's full circle. I wonder. I know we're at sort of almost we are at time, but do you have time for one more question?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess so. The next question really is around, what qualifications, certifications that you've got experience of that BAs can take that will give them an opportunity to get into business analysis. And I wonder, Indy, I mean, your involvement with IIBA, I think you'd be a perfect person to ask that question first, if you don't mind.
I have been anticipating this question, and I'm probably the oldest BA without a CBAP. I didn't write the exam, and so I didn't write the initial exam, so I didn't get automatically grandfathered into the role. I struggle with the certification piece because I do have the certification for cybersecurity, and I also I've taken the C-risk course that I mentioned earlier. The thing is that I think that certification is what we were trying to build so that people were able to be professionals in this industry, so that, there was some sort of credibility there. And the fact that IIBA has gone through the effort of creating the ECBA and the other entry-level certifications is a good thing, because it helps the newer business analysts get some context and understand some of these things, which you don't necessarily get just by walking in off the street and becoming a business analyst in company A. So I think certifications have a role to play, but do they play a role to help you get the job, or do you play the role do you get the certification to show that you have N 100 years of experience being a business analyst? So it's a bit fraught for me personally, because I try to become a CBAP, and I go to IIBA, and I say to them, well, I've got all the working hours, but they're like 10 years old, and they're like, well, tough shit, go find some other place to get 7,500 hours of experience. So that's not going to happen. Never going to happen. I'm too old. I'm just going to die before 7,500. So, it's that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of resentment there in me personally, because it's not geared towards the truly proficient professional who is able to work in those roles, as opposed to someone who has learned the recipe, as I said earlier.
I feel like that's almost similar for most qualifications, though. I mean, I'm immediately thinking like of a driving test, in that we always say that you don't really learn to drive until after you've passed your test, as it were.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like BA is probably similar in that, having the qualifications up front, and probably more importantly, the study to get you to the qualification, gives you that context and information to know what's available, what techniques you could use. You're probably not going to master them because you're not in a practical, a real life scenario. But once you've got those qualifications, and once you get the role rather, then you can deploy those techniques that you've got awareness of, whether or not you've got a qualification in them. And then become the expert afterwards, perhaps, and then maybe get the qualification you hadn't already.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that the biggest issue I've participated in some chapter meetings where the chapter leadership are of the opinion that you must know the business analyst block end to end, and you have to be able to know all the sequences of the knowledge areas and tools and techniques and so on. And I kind of like go by the seat of my pants. I'm not worried about those kinds of things. And so I haven't actually taken any, I've got various books written by various people about, how to write the exam and what to do and that kind of stuff. And I read them all and I'm kind of like, this is what I do. It's my job. So I'm torn. I'm really torn as to whether I should even try, because IIBA won't take me because I don't have enough hours. So in the last 5 years or whatever it was. So I'm really not a huge proponent. I don't think it's totally necessary to be a business CBAP or ECBA to be a business analyst. I think it's being able to understand what is going to happen and how to go about doing the job. That's really the important part.
Yeah, and I think I really share the same sentiment. I think in my own observation and in working with different people here in the UK, the market is more experience driven than certification driven. And you would see somebody who has done some maybe BCS certifications, but are still struggling to get jobs. You can't be trying to apply to like a financial services industry, no work experience in that industry. You don't know what money laundering is, for example. You don't know like the various compliances and regulations they need to deal with, or you're trying to work in a data consultancy company. You don't know about GDPR, about ROPA, those different, data regulations that they are dealing with, and then be hoping to like get something. And I think the people of my own sort of like context to people like Black people, for example, who came to the UK on the route of education, one of the biggest surprises that we always get is a master's degree doesn't necessarily open doors for you. So you see somebody who probably had only like bachelor's getting roles in companies that they would never invite you because you have done many internships in some of these companies in the same industry, and they are much more attractive to employers than you that has a master's degree, even in business analytics, but no work experience within that space. So why I think that because the space is getting more competitive, I mean, because there are so many people now aware of business analysis trying to venture into that space. Maybe being qualified in terms of having a certification could give an advantage, but ultimately I would think that work experience is very good. But if you can complement that with certification, that's even better. But it doesn't mean that without certification, you can't get opportunity. But in terms of myself, my first role here in the UK and my second role and even the third role I'm going into, I got all of that without mentioning any certification. I didn't even have anyone, just my work experiences. But now I have done 4 BCS certifications, but I didn't get those roles because of that, because I just did that just last month. So I think certifications are good, but they are not the ultimate things that probably like give somebody an opportunity. I think the work experience is superior, in my own opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and I do share your views as well. I might say on that. I mean, I feel like just to summarise. I mean, I think for anyone out there, I think there's definitely value in taking qualifications, give you some context, give you some familiarities, inform some techniques, give you some awareness of what you might get into. But they shouldn't be put off from a career in business analysis if they don't have the qualifications. Because as we've heard just in this conversation, but in many BAInsights sessions before this and others, that there's a whole variety of skills that an individual brings to the table that are all, a lot of them are very valuable. We've heard about communication, we've heard about curiosity, we've heard about, a number of political awareness is one that springs to my head as well. I think it's just additive. It's just something that might give an advantage. It might be helpful, but equally, there's other paths that people can take as well. And maybe that's a good point for us to pause. I know I've already taken you a little bit over time, so I do appreciate you taking that extra bit of time to answer that last question as well. But maybe the last thing to cover is really just to thank you both, Indy and Tosin, for your time and for your perspective on what it takes to become a business analyst. I know there's probably others out there that have slightly different paths or maybe different opinions. I definitely encourage those individuals, to share their comments, share their perspective. Definitely be interested, or if maybe you're not familiar with some of the things that we've talked about, look up the BCS and the IIBA and some of the qualifications as well, and form your own view. you know,
Mhm.
and maybe look up Indy or Tosin or myself, and maybe some things we might have written or posted or liked might be of value to you as well.
Yeah.
But thank you, Indy and Tosin. Great to speak to you. Look forward to speaking to you again. But in the meantime, have a good day.
Thank you so much. Bye, John.